Please subscribe to my channel and like my video. Thank you for your support. The arrival of Halloween. The small town of Hollow Creek was preparing for Halloween, as it did every year. The streets were filled with jack-o'-lanterns and ghost decorations. Children eagerly anticipated donning their scariest costumes and going trick or treating. However, this year, something felt different in Hollow Creek. The air was colder than usual, and the town's elders spoke of strange occurrences that hadn't been seen for years. One of the town's oldest houses, the Blackwood Mansion, had been abandoned for years. The stories surrounding the house were enough to scare the townsfolk. Little was known about its former owners, but it was said that strange noises could be heard and shadows seen in the windows. A group of teenagers had a plan for Halloween night. Lily, Tom, Mia, and Ethan were known as the bravest kids in town. For them, this night was the perfect opportunity to visit the Blackwood Mansion and experience the town's scariest legend firsthand. Lily and her friends decided to go to the mansion on Halloween night. They met in the town square early in the evening. Each wore costumes resembling characters from horror movies. Lily had gathered old maps and documents from the town library and put them in her bag. She had researched the history of Blackwood Mansion and the experiences of those who had visited before. Tom brought flashlights and a few bags of candy. Ethan and Mia were equipped with a camera and audio recording devices. The group set off towards the mansion. As they walked through the dark streets, they could hear the screams and laughter rising from the houses, but they were focused on their adventure. When they reached the mansion, the old and dilapidated structure loomed before them. The door creaked open, and a cold wind greeted them as they stepped inside. The interior of the house was dusty and covered in cobwebs, as if untouched for years. Lily switched on her flashlight and led the way. The interior of the house was larger and more complex than they had expected. Rooms opened into one another, and corridors stretched on endlessly. The group delved deeper with each step. They felt as if unseen eyes were watching them from every corner. After a while, they came across an old library. The shelves were filled with old books, some fallen and scattered on the floor. Lily picked up a book and began to leaf through it. The book contained diary entries from the mansion's former owners. The entries spoke of strange events and dark secrets from the past. Lily explained to her friends that these secrets were connected to Halloween night. Just then, Ethan heard a noise. A dark shadow moved in the corner of the library. Everyone froze. Tom pointed his flashlight at the shadow, but saw nothing. Mia began recording with the camera. At that moment, they felt as though they were not alone in the house. The group decided to leave the library and head upstairs. The stairs creaked with each step and felt like they might collapse. Upstairs, a closed door caught their attention. When they opened it, they found themselves in a large room. In the center of the room was an old and dusty table surrounded by broken chairs. On the table were an old photo album and a few personal items. Lily examined the photo album and realized it belonged to the mansion's former owners. The photos depicted happy moments from years past. However, as she reached the last pages, the photos became darker and more disturbing. The final photo showed a tragedy that had occurred in the house. At that moment, the door to the room slammed shut on its own. Everyone stopped and looked at each other. There was a strange energy in the house. Ethan scanned the room with the camera and noticed an old inscription on the wall. It read, "No escape." The energy in the house grew more intense and threatening. The whispers and laughter gave way to sobs and screams. The group was at a loss for what to do. The temperature inside the house dropped suddenly, making it difficult to breathe. In a panic, Mia tried to turn off the camera, but she saw a shadow moving on the wall. Everyone focused on the shadow as it became more defined. A black silhouette seemed to be approaching them. Lily, her hands trembling, closed the album and stepped back. Tom tried to calm the group, but suddenly fell to the ground. He had slipped into an old trap. As he struggled to free his foot, a loud scream from within the house startled them. They could hear footsteps coming from the upper floors. The dark energy in the house had reached its peak. Everyone was in a panic, searching for a way out. Ethan moved toward an old window on the wall and managed to pry it open. The rest of the group quickly joined him, climbing out of the window to escape the mansion. Despite the pain in his injured foot, Tom helped his friends towards the window. As Lily climbed out, she took one last look at the photo album she had left behind. It lay open on the table, the last photo showing an image of them in the mansion that night. This realization struck them with deep dread. Ethan, Mia, and Tom climbed out the window, waiting for Lily. With one final effort, Lily climbed up and out. As the group moved away from the mansion, the sounds from inside grew fainter. The doors and windows of the house closed once more, shrouding it in silence. As the group emerged into the yard, the cold, damp air greeted them. Moonlight illuminated the dark corners of the garden. The farther they got from the mansion, the more distinct the darkness surrounding it became. Lily glanced back one last time and saw silhouettes in the windows. Something was still moving inside. Ethan led the group into the forest. Despite the pain in his foot, Tom tried to appear strong, but it was clear he was struggling with each step. Mia occasionally turned to look back at the mansion, ensuring they were indeed moving away. Entering the forest, the rustling leaves and distant owl hoots made the night even more eerie. Out of breath, the group decided to take a moment to rest. Tom sat under a tree, checking his foot, while Mia tried to turn off the camera, but it wouldn't shut down. It was as if a force wanted the camera to stay on. Lily turned to Ethan and said, "We mustn't tell anyone about tonight." Ethan nodded in agreement. "No one would believe us, and we might be forced to return to that cursed place," he added. After resting, the group continued toward town. When the lights of Hollow Creek appeared on the horizon, everyone felt a bit relieved. The safety of the town's atmosphere calmed them somewhat. As they entered the town square, people were still celebrating Halloween. Children in costumes were collecting candy, and adults were chatting in the square. However, when the group entered, everyone stopped and stared. Their clothes were dirty, faces pale, and filled with fear. Tom's mother ran to him immediately upon seeing his condition. "What happened to you?" she asked, worried. Tom hesitated, unsure of what to say, but finally replied, "We just had a little fun, Mom." Lily, Mia, and Ethan also went to their families and went home without telling them what had happened. However, it was impossible to forget what they had experienced that night. Each hoped for a quiet night when they returned home. As Lily lay in bed, she noticed the photo album on her desk. It was the same album she thought she had left at Blackwood Mansion. As she flipped through the pages, she saw that the last photo had changed. It now showed not only them, but also the ghosts they had left behind. Ethan, Mia, and Tom had similar experiences. Unexplainable changes in their belongings, whispers in their rooms, and shadows in dark corners haunted them. The curse of Hollow Creek had not stayed in Blackwood Mansion, but had followed them home. The group realized that the curse grew stronger with each Halloween and would never leave them. Hollow Creek would never forget what happened that night. The town would remember this terrifying story every Halloween, and the curse of Blackwood Mansion would never end. However, the true nature of this curse would only be known to Lily, Tom, Mia, and Ethan, and it would remain their nightmare. The eyes of the ghosts peering from the windows of the mansion would follow them forever. The secret of Halloween. The night was colder and darker than usual on Halloween. The small town's streets were filled with children dressed as witches, zombies, and various other costumes. However, on the outskirts of town, the old church ruins stood in silence and loneliness, starkly different from the festive atmosphere. According to legends, strange events occurred there at midnight. Anna, Mike, Jenna, and Lucas were four close friends who came together every Halloween for an adventure. This year, they decided to explore the legendary church ruins. Jenna's little sister, Emily, insisted on joining them. Finally, they set off towards the ruins with Emily in tow. As they walked, Emily asked, "Is there really something there?" Mike laughed and said, "Just old stories, Emily. There's nothing to be scared of." But as they approached the ruins, they all felt a shiver run down their spines. When they reached the ruins, the dilapidated structure greeted them with its broken stained glass windows casting eerie shadows on the walls. "Let's go inside," Anna said, taking the first step. Inside, they were met with the smell of dust and decay. As they ventured deeper, they discovered an old cellar entrance. Forcing the door open, they found a room filled with old books and candles on a table. Jenna remarked, "Something happened here." Just then, Emily screamed. They turned to see her pointing at a dark shadow on the wall, which quickly disappeared. The group calmed Emily down and followed the shadow. In the depths of the cellar, they found an old coffin. When they lifted the lid, they found it empty, but discovered a journal beside it. The journal contained the writings of an old priest who lived in the church, detailing the dark secrets and horrifying events that took place there. According to the priest, the church was once the center of a cult that dealt with dark forces. The cult performed spirit-summoning rituals, trying to communicate with dark entities. But one night, something went terribly wrong during a ritual, resulting in a horrifying explosion. Since then, the church was deemed cursed and abandoned. "Is this story real?" Anna asked. Mike replied, "I don't know, but I don't want to stay here." Just then, the cellar door slammed shut with a loud bang, and the candles went out, plunging them into darkness. Emily screamed again and suddenly vanished. The rest of the group fumbled in the dark, trying to find her. Lucas heard Emily's whispers from a corner and moved towards the sound. But when he found her, her eyes were empty and hollow. Emily muttered, "They're coming," as she walked towards Lucas. At that moment, dark figures emerged from the walls of the cellar. Anna, Mike, and Jenna rushed to Lucas and Emily. But the dark figures cornered them. These figures were the spirits of the cult, trapped in the church due to the failed ritual. They intended to curse anyone who entered the church. In a final effort, the group broke down the cellar door and fled outside. Once they were outside, they realized the spirits had stopped pursuing them. Emily returned to normal, but a strange mark remained on her neck. "When did this happen?" Lucas asked. "I don't remember," Emily replied, but the group knew it was linked to the church's curse. The terrifying events of Halloween night left indelible marks on the friends' memories. The curse of the church hadn't let them go. Emily began to have horrific nightmares, seeing herself trapped in the cellar surrounded by dark figures. She would wake up with her neck mark hurting, as if the spirits were still touching her. Lucas did everything he could to comfort Emily, but he too was haunted by the night's memories. He would check all doors and windows before bed every night, trying to ensure his safety, but unable to quell his fear. Anna and Mike grew closer after the incident, supporting each other to overcome the trauma. However, Anna's curiosity drove her to learn more about the church's curse. She spent hours in the town's library, searching for clues and reading old journals. She discovered more about the rituals and the origins of the curse. One day, Anna found an old book detailing the church's founding period. It contained information on the rituals performed and how to break the curse. However, it required a great sacrifice. Determined to end the curse, Anna shared her findings with her friends. Reuniting, the group realized they had to return to the church to break the curse. This time, they were better prepared, bringing holy water, charms, and protective prayers. On Halloween night, they returned to the church. Their goal was to end the curse and remove the mark from Emily's neck. When they arrived at the church, they bravely entered. In the cellar, they began performing the ritual described in the priest's journal. As they performed the ritual, dark figures reappeared, filling the cellar. But this time, the group acted with determination. Pouring holy water on the figures made them scream and retreat. The charms and prayers weakened their power. As they reached the final step of the ritual, a loud explosion shook the walls, and a bright light appeared in the center of the cellar, signaling the end of the curse. After completing the ritual, the group exited the cellar. Emily's neck mark had disappeared, and she felt relieved for the first time. However, a sense of fear and curiosity lingered within them. Returning to town, they decided not to tell anyone about the events. But Anna continued her research, wanting to understand the origins of the curse and why it chose them. In her dreams, Emily saw the church again, but this time with a peaceful light and a soothing voice saying, "You ended the curse, but this is only the beginning." Emily woke up to find the mark on her neck had returned, deeper and more painful. Reuniting with her friends, they realized the curse wasn't entirely gone and a greater danger awaited them. This time, they were more determined and prepared to uncover the secrets of the church and end the curse for good. This story became a legend, a warning to the town's youth, and a testament to the power of friendship and courage. Every Halloween, the tale was retold, urging new generations to avoid the church. Yet, some secrets are never truly forgotten and always return. Stores 3. The Halloween Day. On a chilly October evening, leaves rustled through the narrow streets of the small town. Houses adorned for Halloween with jack-o'-lanterns, eerie silhouettes in windows, and strange decorations at every corner filled the atmosphere with a blend of excitement and fear. Julia had one thing on her mind: the abandoned hospital that had been the subject of countless ghost stories. The old Cunningham Asylum had a notorious reputation, and on this Halloween, Julia and her friends decided to challenge its mysteries. Julia, along with her friends Mark, Lisa, and Kevin, stood in front of the imposing iron gates of the hospital. Rust and dust from years of neglect coated the once grand entrance. Above the gate, a faded sign read, "Cunningham Asylum." Mark, holding a flashlight, struggled with the lock while Julia and Lisa kept a lookout. Kevin recorded everything on his phone, eager to document their adventure. When they finally managed to open the gate, they stepped inside. The asylum was dark and foreboding. Hallways, empty rooms, and medical equipment long abandoned created an atmosphere of dread. Every step echoed loudly, adding to their growing unease. Julia whispered, "This place is really creepy." As they ventured deeper into the asylum, strange occurrences began. At first, they attributed the sounds to the wind and the old building. However, when Kevin, wandering alone in one room, saw a shadow move behind him, he quickly turned around but saw nothing. "This place is truly haunted," he muttered. Lisa, exploring another room filled with old patient records, suddenly saw writing appear on the wall. "You'll never leave." Clutching her flashlight tightly, she stepped back. Mark tried to laugh it off. It must be a prank, but there was a tremor in his voice. As they delved deeper into the hospital, they realized they were lost. Every corridor looked the same, each room equally ominous. "How do we get out of here?" Mark asked, anxiety creeping into his voice. "We need to stay calm and stick together," Kevin replied. Just then, Julia screamed, "Where's Lisa?" Lisa had strayed from the group and was now missing. Panicked, they searched for her but found no trace. "This place is trapping us," Julia said, her voice shaking. The group descended deeper, the corridors growing darker and colder. Kevin saw shadows moving along the walls. "Someone's watching us," he whispered. "We need to get out of here," Mark added, but all the doors were locked. Julia found an old map and tried to navigate their way out, but the layout seemed to shift. "We're never getting out of here," Lisa cried, her fear overwhelming her. Finally, the group found an exit door. However, when they opened it, they faced a solid wall. "How is this possible?" Mark shouted. "This place has us trapped," Julia said. Kevin pounded on the walls to no avail. Then they heard a voice echoing through the asylum. "There is no escape." The group huddled together in fear. This place intended to keep them forever. Julia, Lisa, Mark, and Kevin wandered the asylum in desperation, encountering more horrors at every turn. Echoing screams, shifting shadows, and every step deepened their terror. Julia said, "There must be a way to break this curse." The group decided to venture into the basement. There, among old medical equipment and files, they found a large, ominous book. The book detailed the hospital's dark history and the horrific experiments conducted by the doctors on their patients. These experiments had caused many deaths, and the book revealed that the asylum was cursed because of these atrocities. The spirits of those who died here were trapped, haunting the place. Julia said, "We need to end this curse." But as shadows emerged in the basement, they surrounded the group, each representing their deepest fears. Julia, Lisa, Mark, and Kevin faced their worst nightmares. Each one was consumed by their fears, disappearing one by one into the shadows. Julia whispered, "We won't escape." In the end, the group was entirely lost, and the asylum fell silent once more. The next morning, the townspeople gathered outside the hospital, finding no trace of Julia, Lisa, Mark, or Kevin. The asylum had claimed its victims again, reinforcing its haunted reputation. No one dared to enter again, and it stood as a chilling reminder of Halloween night's terror. A journalist investigating the hospital discovered old newspaper clippings detailing the horrors within. The asylum owner was a dark sorcerer, and the curse was the result of a ritual gone wrong. The curse was still active, ensnaring anyone who entered. The journalist warned the townspeople, but the asylum remained the town's greatest fear. Julia, Lisa, Mark, and Kevin's spirits, trapped forever, continued to haunt the dark corridors, a stark reminder of the chilling Halloween night. Stories 4: The Dark Night of Halloween. The small and peaceful town of Willow Creek in Quebec was quieter than usual as Halloween approached. A light fog drifted through the streets, and the trees, adorned with autumn colors, rustled in the wind. Mandy, Steve, Harriet, and Wesley decided to celebrate Halloween together as they did every year. This time, however, they planned to camp in the forest just outside of town, hoping to escape the city and enjoy nature for a few days. The four friends eagerly finished their preparations and set off towards the forest in Mandy's car. The journey was filled with laughter, jokes, and excited conversations. They had chosen a secluded spot known only to the most experienced campers in town, a wide clearing surrounded by dense trees. After setting up their tents and lighting the campfire, they spent the night telling entertaining stories and gazing at the stars. Although Harriet felt a bit uneasy, her friends' cheer and confidence helped her relax. However, as the night progressed, they began to hear strange sounds in the forest. Around midnight, they heard the sound of dry branches snapping nearby. Mandy suggested it was just an animal and urged everyone to stay calm. Wesley, however, insisted the noise was made by a person, growing increasingly anxious. Steve joked about ghosts or creatures, trying to lighten the mood. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness. Wearing a tattered old coat and holding a large knife, the figure advanced towards them. The four friends looked at each other in terror. Harriet screamed, and the figure quickly approached. Mandy grabbed a flashlight from the tent and tried to illuminate the area. The figure was a serial killer, intent on hunting them down. As the killer advanced rapidly, the four friends panicked and ran into the depths of the forest. Wesley tripped and sprained his ankle, falling to the ground. Steve immediately turned back to help him, but the killer was closing in. Struggling to escape, Wesley and Steve managed to move forward despite Wesley's injury. Mandy and Harriet, running faster, took refuge in a nearby cave. Inside the cave, Mandy and Harriet searched for an exit while hearing footsteps behind them. The killer was getting closer. The cave was more complex than they had thought, with tunnels intertwining. As they continued, they briefly saw the killer's eyes in the darkness. Panicked, Harriet ran in one direction, and Mandy followed. Despite their injuries, Steve and Wesley regrouped and devised a plan. Wesley's ankle was in bad shape, but Steve was determined not to leave him behind. Meanwhile, Mandy and Harriet, still inside the cave, realized they were lost and trapped. The killer was cunning, aiming to pick them off one by one. Unable to find an exit, Mandy and Harriet noticed the killer closing in. Desperately, they hugged each other. At that moment, they saw a light from a corner of the cave. It was Steve and Wesley's flashlight. Reunited, the four friends found themselves cornered by the killer. In a final desperate attempt, Steve attacked the killer with a large rock. Wesley, Mandy, and Harriet joined in, trying to overpower the killer. However, the killer was strong and determined. After a prolonged struggle, the killer severely injured Wesley and moved towards the others. In the midst of the life and death struggle, Steve bravely tackled the killer, bringing him to the ground. The killer, however, responded with unexpected speed and knocked Steve down. Despite his pain, Wesley got up, grabbed a branch, and attacked the killer. Meanwhile, Harriet and Mandy began throwing stones to distract the killer. The killer was momentarily disoriented by a large stone Harriet threw, hitting him in the head and causing him to fall. Mandy seized the opportunity, took the knife from the killer's hand, and ran to her friends. However, the killer was not finished. Slowly getting up, he walked towards them again. In a moment of terror, Harriet saw hesitation and fear in the killer's eyes. Seeing the courage and determination of Steve, Wesley, and her friends, even this dark figure hesitated. But the hesitation was brief. The killer made one last lunge at Wesley. Steve gathered all his strength, tackled the killer to the ground. Mandy, holding the knife, walked towards the killer without hesitation, her eyes filled with resolve and anger. The killer did not expect this bold move. Harriet stood beside Mandy, offering her support. Mandy drove the knife into the killer's heart, and he let out a scream before falling silent. As the killer's lifeless body lay on the ground, the four friends took a deep breath. Despite Wesley's severe injuries, they managed to help him out of the cave. As dawn broke, rescue teams and police arrived at the scene. The four friends recounted their night of horror, making the rest of the town aware of the terrifying event. This horrific event had once again revealed the dark side of Halloween. Willow Creek took a long time to recover from this incident. The four friends, having survived the darkest night of their lives, clung to each other even more tightly and never forgot this terrifying memory. After the event, Halloween celebrations in the town became much more cautious and subdued. But each year, as they remembered this night, they recalled the terror they had faced and their unwavering bond. Thank you for listening.